A mysterious spiral in the Alaska sky had an earthly explanation. A large blue swirl that appeared in the night sky and within the aurora borealis did not have to do with aliens but was probably a fuel dump from a SpaceX rocket launch. At first, Ronnie Cole thought the bright light in the sky over southern Alaska was an airplane. Mr. Cole, a tour guide with Alaska Photo Treks, was setting up a portrait with two of his clients in the early hours of Saturday when he noticed there was something weird about the light. It started to create a spiral pattern. It was really small at first, he said. Then, it moved out of the clouds and the spiral was still there, and it was just getting bigger in the sky. That's when I realized that it was something else. The blue spiral made its way across the sky's green and red hue of the northern lights for about 3 minutes before disappearing over the tree line near Trapper Creek, about 100 miles northwest of Anchorage. I've spent about 1,000 plus hours out watching the night sky every winter, Mr. Cole said. I see a lot of weird things in the sky, but that was definitely the most unusual. It wasn't until 8 a.m. when he got home from the tour that Mr. Cole learned on social media what it was. As foreign as the swirl seemed, the answer was simple. SpaceX had launched a Falcon 9 rocket in California, and the reflection of the excess fuel it released into the atmosphere had probably created the dizzying pattern. Needless to say, at the time of the phenomenon, the rest of Mr. Cole's tour clients spilled out of a nearby van to get a better look. It was really a surreal experience to see this constantly expanding spiral coming across the sky coming toward us, he said. I didn't even bother moving my camera, I was just hitting the shutter button. Mr. Cole was one of a number of spectators, both in person and afar, to observe the spectacle of a SpaceX rocket careening against the natural spectacle of the northern lights. The rocket launched from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California on Friday night, carrying 51 pieces of cargo, and 3 hours later could be seen over Alaska. A similar spiral was seen over Hawaii in January. Don Hampton, a research associate professor at the Geophysical Institute of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, called the sighting unique in part because of the specific conditions allowing it to occur. It was a clear, dark night on the ground, and the rocket fuel or exhaust was released into the direct sunlight of the aurora, spiraling in a long, sprinkler effect. If this had happened in the middle of winter, you probably wouldn't have seen it because the sun's shadow would have been much higher, he said. Mr. Hampton said the rocket was probably dumping fuel high enough in the atmosphere that ultraviolet light broke it down and dispersed the particles across the globe. He said that pollution from the rocket fuel was not a great concern. Aurora borealis, the natural displays of color commonly referred to as northern lights because of the higher visibility at higher latitudes, occur when charged particles from the sun collide with charged particles already in Earth's magnetic field, releasing energy into the atmosphere that interacts with gas to create the visible glow. The lights attract tourists like Mr. Cole's group and Kristen Lang, who first visited Alaska last year with her husband and now owns a house just north of Fairbanks. However, she doesn't have to leave her home in Midlothian, Texas, to see an aurora. In fact, this time of year, Ms. Lang starts her mornings in Texas by watching the previous night's sky via cameras angled toward the sky that sit atop her Alaska home. Continue reading the main story. The cameras have captured a couple of shooting stars, meteorites and satellites, but as Ms. Lang was reviewing the tape on Saturday morning, she saw a bright ball. I was like, what the heck is that? She said on Wednesday. She sped up the time-lapse video as a blue swirl traversed a green sky and consulted a sky map. This time we caught Falcon 9. She said it was the coolest thing we could possibly catch. And it probably won't be the last time it happens, Mr. Hampton said. It's just a fun spectacle to see, and as we continue to do more launches, especially some of the larger ones, people will likely see them again, Mr. Hampton said. It's reasonably well explained. It's not the aliens landing as far as I know. They may be landing, but that was not an indication they were. The northern lights were seen farther south in the United States. A powerful geomagnetic storm helped to make the colorful aurora visible in places like North Carolina and Arizona on Thursday night. James Reynolds was sitting at home scrolling through Twitter on Thursday night when photos of the aurora borealis started to flood his timeline. Mr. Reynolds, a professional photographer who lives just outside Asheville, NC, decided to load up his equipment and to drive with his wife and 10-year-old son to the Blue Ridge Parkway, a popular, scenic road about an hour from his home. After getting set up there and snapping a few shots, Mr. Reynolds finally spotted it. Purple hues dancing in the sky. It felt like the sky was alive, said Mr. Reynolds, 45. It was a joyful moment to see it with the Blue Ridge Mountains and my familiar home environment in the background, where you would never expect to see something like that. The colorful streaks in the sky, also known as the Northern Lights, are often visible from places like Alaska, Canada and Iceland. But on Thursday night, a severe geomagnetic storm brought the auroras to Minnesota, New York and Virginia, and the views even moved as far south as Arizona and North Carolina. The Space Weather Prediction Center at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration rated the geomagnetic storm's severity a level 4 on its 5-tier scale. Catching a glimpse of the auroras requires electrons from solar wind to hit the electrons that are already trapped around Earth's magnetic field, which then acts like a slingshot, said C. Alex Young, the Associate Director for Science in the Heliophysics Science Division at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. The energy comes from a coronal mass ejection, a large expulsion of plasma from the Sun, which causes the magnetic field around Earth to shake. That creates geomagnetic storms that produce the aurora. The colors seen in the sky are dictated by where in the atmosphere the oxygen and nitrogen hit. Dr. Young said. Green and red largely come from oxygen, and blue stems from nitrogen. Mostly, that energy is driven to the Earth's north and south poles, but the stronger the storm is, the more likely it is to be seen in lower latitudes like the southern United States. At first, Dr. Young said, Thursday's geomagnetic storms were forecast to potentially reach only a level 3. In the days prior, the Sun had several small coronal mass ejections, but forecasters believed their impact had largely brushed past Earth. As it turned out, he said, there had been 2 ejections that got closer to Earth, helping to give it an extra kick to the Earth when the electrons reached the magnetic field. It only lasted for a couple hours, but that's why people were seeing it on the horizon so much further south than usual, he said. It's been so exciting and quite spectacular. It's difficult to pinpoint how often strong geomagnetic storms like this one occur, Dr. Young said. Typically, anywhere from 50 to 100 storms of this magnitude may occur over an 11-year solar cycle, and they become more likely as the end of the cycle nears in 2025. This image, taken from video provided by the Asahi Shimbun, shows spirals swirling through the night sky from Mauna Kea, Hawaii's tallest mountain. Researchers believe it shows the after effects of a SpaceX rocket launch when the company's Falcon 9 rocket sent a GPS satellite into orbit. The images were captured on Jan. 18, 2023, by a camera at the summit of Mauna Kea outside the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan's Subaru telescope. Asahi Shimbun via app. Honolulu app. A camera atop Hawaii's tallest mountain has captured what looks like a spiral swirling through the night sky. Researchers believe it was from the launch of a military GPS satellite that lifted off earlier on a SpaceX rocket in Florida. 18 by a camera at the summit of Mauna Kea outside the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan's Subaru telescope. A time-lapse video shows a white orb spreading out and forming a spiral as it moves across the sky. It then fades and disappears. Ichi Tanaka, a researcher at the Subaru telescope, said he was doing other work that night and didn't immediately see it. Then a stargazer watching the camera's live stream on YouTube sent him a screenshot of the spiral using an online messaging platform. When I opened Slack, that is what I saw, and it was a jaw-dropping event for me, Tanaka said. He saw a similar spiral last April, also after a SpaceX launch, but that one was larger and more faint. SpaceX launched a military satellite the morning of Jan. 18 from Florida's Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The location of the spiral matched where the second stage of the SpaceX rocket was expected to be after its launch. SpaceX didn't respond to an email sent Friday seeking comment. Tanaka said the observatory installed the camera to monitor the surroundings outside the Subaru telescope and to share Mauna Kea's clear skies with the people of Hawaii and the world. Someone watching the sky in less clear conditions, for example from Tokyo, might not have seen the spiral, he said. The live stream is jointly operated with the Asahi Shimbun, a major Japanese newspaper, and frequently gets hundreds of viewers. Some tune in to watch meteors streak across the sky.